For years, language learning has meant memorizing verb conjugations and diagramming sentences. It's the old school way, the way we were all taught. But is it any effective? Let's face it, the world of language learning is constantly evolving. New tools as well as approaches are emerging, challenging the status quo. Today, we're going to explore why grammar might not be the key to unlocking fluent communication and how you can leverage these fresh ideas to supercharge your language learning journey. Before we start, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to get notified about our future language learning content. Without further introduction, let's begin. Think about how you learned your first language. You didn't memorize a bunch of rules like subject-verb agreement or past perfect tense, right? Instead, you were surrounded by language, listening to your parents talk, watching TV shows, and maybe even singing along to nursery rhymes. As you were exposed to these things, your brain started noticing patterns. You figured out, for example, that statements often follow a subject-verb-object order, or that adding ed to the end of a word usually turns it into the past tense. This is the magic of implicit learning. You absorb the language naturally without needing to cram rules. It's like learning a song by ear, where you can hum the melody even if you can't read the sheet music. The same principle applies to mastering a new language. By immersing yourself in conversations, reading books, or watching movies, you'll start to pick up the grammar patterns without feeling overwhelmed by technical details. This is the magic of implicit grammar is definitely a tool that helps us understand the structure of language, although it's not the only factor. Moreover, it can sometimes overshadow the real goal: communication. Imagine two students, Alice and Bob. Alice is a grammar whiz. She can identify dangling participles and knows the difference between a dependent and independent clause in her sleep. Bob, on the other hand, struggles with some grammatical concepts. However, Bob has spent years immersing himself in English movies and music. He can hold conversations with native speakers, understand jokes, and even tell a funny story himself. Sure, his grammar might not always be perfect. Maybe he says goed instead of went sometimes. But here's the key point: people understand him perfectly. Alice, due to a fear of making a mistake, might be hesitant to speak. The truth is, clear communication is more important than perfect grammar, especially in everyday situations. Now, it doesn't mean grammar is useless, but it's a tool to enhance your communication, not a barrier to it. So, why do schools put such a heavy emphasis on grammar rules? It's true that grammar provides a framework for understanding how a language works. It helps us analyze sentences, identify different parts of speech, and understand sentence structure. This can be valuable, especially when dealing with complex written language or formal settings. However, traditional grammar-focused learning often misses the mark when it comes to fluency and practical communication. Here's where immersion comes in. Imagine a classroom where students are surrounded by the language they're learning. They're reading engaging stories, watching movies without subtitles, and participating in conversations. Through this immersion, they start to unconsciously absorb the patterns and rules of the language, just like they did with their first language. They learn verb conjugations by hearing them used in everyday situations, not by memorizing endless verb tables. They grasp sentence structure by naturally picking up on how ideas flow in conversation. This immersive approach not only makes learning more engaging and enjoyable, but it also leads to a deeper understanding of how the language is actually used in real-world contexts. Don't get me wrong, there's a place for some grammar instruction, but it should complement immersion rather than replace it. Think of it this way: grammar is like learning the blueprint of a house, while immersion is like actually living in the house and experiencing it firsthand. Which one do you think helps you feel more comfortable and navigate the space more naturally? Think back to how you learned your first language. You weren't bombarded with grammar drills, were you? You were surrounded by the language, listening to your parents talk, watching cartoons, reading picture books. You absorbed the patterns of how words fit together to create meaning without even realizing it. This natural approach to language acquisition is incredibly powerful. By immersing yourself in a language, your brain starts to recognize and internalize the grammatical structures on its own. It's like planting a seed. The more exposure you have, the more naturally your understanding of grammar will blossom. Grammar isn't irrelevant, of course. There will likely come a time when you want to understand specific rules for more precise communication. Maybe you're writing a formal email for work or crafting a creative writing piece. Perhaps you're aiming for a very high level of fluency and want to eliminate those lingering hesitations. That's fantastic. Learning grammar at this point becomes a targeted exercise, focusing on the areas that will truly elevate your communication. Think of it like this. Imagine you've been speaking a language conversationally for a while. You're comfortable getting by, but you notice there are certain situations where your grammar might hold you back. Maybe you want to sound more professional or write with greater clarity. This is the perfect time to delve into specific grammar rules. You'll approach the learning with a clear purpose and a foundation of understanding built through immersion. Remember, grammar learning should be on your terms. It ought to complement your existing language skills and fuel your desire for more precise communication. Don't feel pressured to memorize a textbook full of rules before you start speaking. The key is to find a balance between immersion and focused learning, creating a personalized path to fluency. There you have it. Grammar shouldn't be the roadblock on your language learning journey. Focus on immersion, embrace the natural way of picking up patterns, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Remember, communication is king. That's how we learn best. Want more language learning hacks? Smash that like button and subscribe for more tips and tricks. See you next time.